The American Style, the legend of Old John Tom Hickorywood is brought to you by these sponsors. Major funding for the legend of Old Tom John Hickorywood is provided by the Me More TV Here With Us Now Foundation. And it is also from you.
In the quiet, snow-covered hills of northern Kentucky, a legend was born in 1785. A legend that would capture the imagination of generations. This is the story of Old John Tom Hickorywood, a mysterious figure whose presence has sparked countless tales of wonder and mystery. But who was he? A real man or a product of imagination? Join us as we explore the legend and the sightings that have kept it alive for centuries. It was 1785 in a rural northern Kentucky, and a 12-year-old Mason door pump was on his way to school. He had walked 11 miles in the snow to sit with a handful of other students in a dirty old one-room schoolhouse full of dirty old-style toys in order to learn how to spell three-letter words and draw a picture of Santa. 12 years of hardcore learning had not just taught Mason how to make his drawings and spell his words, however. Mrs. Torn, his teacher, had also instilled in him and the other students a strong creative spirit. Mrs. Torn was the wife of Jim Torn, a local artist, and she herself was something of a creative person as well. Her and her husband would regale the students with tales of local legends, and these of your style stories. On this particular February day, Mason Door Pump was enjoying a classic afternoon in the classroom until something caught his eye. Outside, he saw a man, about 100 feet from the schoolhouse, working in the snow and setting up some sort of cestone in the trees. He was distracted and couldn't help but interrupt his teacher, Mrs. Torn. He rushed to the window, and the other students joined him. What they all saw that day would spark the beginnings of one of the most enduring American legends. They saw a dirty man in the tree setting up ropes and other pulley systems, then hanging pots and pans from the dirty ropes. The man proceeded to puck the pots and pans up and down and scream in a high-pitched squeal. The children couldn't believe their eyes, and neither could Mrs. Torn. Mason Door Pump grew up to write 13 novels about the man he and the others in the schoolhouse saw that day, and Old John Tom Hickorywood was born. But was he fact or fiction? Flash forward to 87 years later, in 1872. Eventually, Mason became doctor from having studied hard, so he became doctor. Now was called Doctor as an old man. Dr. Doorpump, a.k.a. Mason, was a 99-year-old man now on his deathbed. And he told the people in the room that all his books had been a lie and that he made up the whole story. However, he had just consumed over 10 gallons of a mysterious liquid before making this proclamation. But we'll come back to this later. For now, let's explore Old John Tom Hickorywood and discover if he is real. Thank you. Let's jump back again 12 years to 1860. It was summertime in Gass, Tennessee, and a group of railroad greasers were hard at work greasing the tracks so that a 10 o'clock Atlantic Pacific choo-choo would be able to slide into station without any hiccups. It was a regular routine for 34-year-old Michael Johnston and 22-year-old Willie Carlson. The two men would grease the track, the choo-choo would slide in, and the big boxes of crap would be unloaded. It was as simple as that. On this day, it was not as simple as that. The train was late, And so the greasers were tasked with making a 4-mile journey into the wilderness to investigate whether or not the choo-choo had made it past a particularly difficult pass in the mountains. A large cliff called Fearful Cliff had claimed the lives of over 200 individuals in that year alone, as over 100 trains had fallen off the railway bridge since it was not greased enough. Contrary to popular belief, trainways, aka railways, need to be greased extremely well for the train to not slip and slide. When greasers Michael Johnston and Willie Carlson arrived at the bridge, they did not see a smoking mess down below the bridge, like they expected, but instead a man, dressed in what they called a bright boy's shirt and fine leg drapes. He had a long white beard and a tall green hat with several feathers sticking out of it. He appeared to be jumping up and down over 10 feet in the air and banging pots and pans that he had fashioned to ropes in the trees. He repeatedly slapped the pots and pans while at the same time making high-pitched squealing noises. The men were terrified. They returned to the train station dumbfounded, pale as a ghost, as if they had seen a train wreck or a ghost. The story was recounted in Louis Carlson's diary 23,360 times, once each day until the day he died at age 86 in 1924. His diary was found in a birdhouse in Morris, Missouri in 1967. It had been placed there by his son, who was a professional bird wrangler. It was 1922 when the dark-haired punk salesman was making his way door to door in New York City to sell rich individuals brand new pumps and hoses. Punks had been outlawed in neighboring New Jersey just 2 years ago, and New Yorkers were as eager as ever to gather pumps and hoses in order to brag to their New Jersey neighbors. Part status symbol, part brag toy, pumps and hoses were accessories that anybody who was any one body would have for sure. You needed pump and hose to be seen as a rich style. Do you understand? The dark-haired pump salesman was Bart Niestack. He was the grandfather of Simpsons writer Ray Cook, so he was the inspiration of the name of Bart from Simpson, which I can get into later and is a whole other story. Bart Niestack was on his last day of bourgeois duty and was to be switched to desk duty. The company he worked for, J.R. Richards & Sons New York Pumps and Hoses Corporation, was reassigning him from door-to-door selling to being able to relax in their Manhattan office. There he would touch and look at pumps and hoses all day and just relax, instead of walking around and having to talk to people. It was his last day, so he was excited. He was also very impatient. So impatient that instead of knocking on his last door of the day, he barged into the hole. Bart kicked down the door and stormed into the house, then began giving his sales spiel totally uninvited. The house seemed empty at first, and Bart, eager to end his day, shouted out his pitch at lightning speed. He was quickly interrupted, however, by the sounds of clanging pans and high-pitched squeals. His curiosity got the better of him, and he exited the home's parlor, ventured up the stairs, and found a man, dressed in bright white t-shirt and pant, screaming hardcore, banging pot and pan hung by rope inside the room. This terrified Bart, and he ran out screaming. The next day, he reported what he saw to his superiors at J.R. Richards & Sons New York Pumps and Hoses Corporation, and they were dumbfounded. They couldn't believe the incredible story and demanded proof, or they said they would fire his ass. Bart took his bosses to the location of the home, but instead of finding a home, he found a vacant lot. Mysteriously, the entire building was gone. His bosses fired his ass on the spot and then ran away as fast as they could. Bart stood in front of the lot and wept. It was the best job he ever had, and he was about to relax in the office for the rest of his career. He looked at the ground in the lot where the house once stood and found a single pan. The same pan that the strange man was pumping the day before. He kept it, and it can still be viewed to this day at Ray's Folk Museum in Elwood, Maine. These stories all share something in common. Number one is that the common thing they share is that it is always a man with a beard and white garments. In all cases, the individual seen is dressed and adorned in a bright white style. Another thing which all these stories have in common is that the man has a large beard. He is banging pots and pans, and the pans are connected to dirty ropes which hang. He is almost always seen screaming in a high-pitched style. It's something incredible what we do as Americans and as citizens in enjoying hardcore folks, aka folklore heroes. Could it be that our collective imaginations is tricking us collectively? Or maybe it is not imagination at all, but rather it is truth observations that we have seen. Perhaps the greatest mystery of all was how a character could be at once so terrifying and so enjoyable, and at the same time so close to our hearts and minds. The mysterious man seeing banging pots and pans that has come to be known as Old John Tom Hickorywood started as any other American legend on that winter's day in 1785, but has grown into something much more than a common legend. Old John Tom Hickorywood speaks to what it means to be an American, the frontiersman, the rail greaser, the pump salesman, the dung smasher, the unknown pumper. We are American folks, and our hero is Old John Tom Hickorywood. Some say, if you listen closely on a crisp, cool Kentucky night, you can still hear John banging and pumping his dirty pots and ropes. Let us be quiet now and listen. Thank you.